The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, I'm Travis Johnson, a Grants Program Associate here at the American Probation and Parole Association. We want to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Cultural Alternatives to Western Treatment Modalities. This webinar series is part of a BJA-funded grant project that we have here at APPA, as well as an opportunity to provide some professional development virtually during the current coronavirus pandemic. Before we get started today, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping items real quick. Firstly, on the side of the screen on your GoToWebinar panel, you'll see a handout section, and there's a downloadable PDF there. That is all the references Dr. Arviso has used to throw this content together for us today. Feel free to download that before we adjourn here, in case you guys want to follow up on any of the articles or information she shares today. Second, this broadcast is going to be recorded, and we'll later have it archived via APPA Connect for you guys to access and tell your coworkers about and things if you want to watch it again or something like that. Everyone's mics will be muted today throughout the duration of the broadcast, so should you have any questions, please submit that in the questions pane of the control panel on the side there of GoToWebinar. And if you're having any tech issues, you can't hear, or you get anything like that, please send that through to us in the chat message, and I'll try and help you out as best as I can. Yeah, that's it. So before I hand it over to Dr. Arviso, I just wanted to let everyone know about APPA's Virtual Institute. Unfortunately, with the way things are in the world right now, we are not able to have our normal institute that we have in New York City like was planned. So we're keeping the same dates and doing a virtual institute with on-demand workshops and live workshops and opening speakers, and it's all the usual APPA Institute stuff. If you've been to one before, please visit our APPA website if you're interested in attending, and that's here in about a week and a half. And once you get to the APPA website, you'll also see a new key resources for COVID page that we've thrown together with various resources and information from the field about how to tackle COVID-19 in community justice and supervision. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Arviso and let her do her thing and get out of the way here. Dr. Arviso is currently... Sorry, Dr. Arviso, I was reading the opening of your bio and realized that you got a new job on Friday, so let me find a good starting point here. Dr. Arviso obtained her doctoral degree in clinical psychology from the Department of Psychology at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, and her postdoctoral degree in school psychology from the University of Arizona. She currently teaches, mentors, and provides holistic support to Native American students who attend the University of Arizona, and she is a skilled psychologist with vast experience in hospital and school-based programs. Dr. Arviso is also a member of the Navajo Nation and is a proud member of her cultural heritage. She is currently fluent in Navajo and strongly supports Native American Indigenous students, and is a dedicated psychologist with the ongoing goal of being of service, especially to underrepresented and underserved minorities. In the fall of 2017, she was recognized with the Sweetgrass Award under the American Psychological Association, and she was also awarded the 2016 Phyllis J. Big Pond Lifetime Achievement Award, sponsored by the Arizona American Indian Excellence in Leadership Program in Phoenix, Arizona. And with that, I'll let you take over, Dr. Arviso.
Thank you so much, Travis. I am very grateful to you, as well as Pam and Nan, for having me do this presentation this morning on behalf of the American Probation and Parole Association. Yad atgahas goshe had soinishne toihet lini bashashin nanisht ejedashche khanesane dashanele. I'm originally from the Eastern Navajo part of the Navajo Nation. I currently reside in Tucson, and I just introduced myself with my clan, so I may have relatives out there. So thank you, relatives and friends, for joining this presentation, this webinar this morning. So my overall presentation here is on the programs having to do with reentry on our people that come out of the the jails or prison system. So with the introduction here, we have 1.7% of the U.S. population identified as American Indian Alaska Native. This is census data from 2012, and we are looking at Native Americans that are living on the reservation or off the reservation or both. Some of our members of our tribal nations, they do travel between rural and reservation life. So we do have diversity and acculturation. We have unique histories, unique values, and we have our own traditional practices. Overall, we have a large number of tribal representation across the U.S., depending on what data that you are looking at. Okay, next slide, Travis. Okay, the Native Americans in the federal offender population in fiscal year 2013, there was over 80,000 cases reported. Of that cases, there was over 1,000 Native American offenders. And when you look at this data, the top 5 states that had large numbers of Native Americans were South Dakota, Arizona, New Mexico, and North Dakota. And the top offenses that we are looking at are drug trafficking, aggravated assault, fraud, and firearms. Okay, next slide. When we think about barriers of readjustment, how our people are going back into re-entry into their community or places of their residence, they are faced with many barriers such as difficulty adjusting and mental health issues, looking at anxiety, depression, substance and drug abuse, discouragement, recidivism, and lack of support. And this is well documented in some of the literature that I have reviewed and bring forth to your attention today. These barriers of adjustment are real, and our people do need a lot of support. Okay, next slide. Having to do with readjustment or reentry, service providers do need to be aware of the positive predictors that lie out there. This leads to increased success and increased readjustment when there's a structured setting, when there's a welcoming protocol. Sometimes we need to be creative beyond just realizing that some of our people are coming back into our communities, but what do we do to welcome them back? And it's part of being responsible and accountable and being able to reach out with additional funding and resources so that transition back home is made in a positive way, so that their treatment can be tailored to the individual needs of our people that are returning home. And home can be both on the reservation and in the urban environment. Okay, next slide. Some of the practices in the community that is cited through literature and that I've read and have worked with before, both on the reservation and in the urban environment, is the bond with the community is really important. Being able to have that connection and relationships built, and there's a tradition and identity values that are honored in our tribal backgrounds, you know, the villages that we live in, the community that we live in. They have these values in place. And when our people are away from that in the parole or the prison or jail setting, they come away from that traditions. So when they do re-enter, there is that bond with community that is needed. And then also programming that is encompassing prevention, networking, providing education and partnerships. Again, looking at the readjustment, re-entry, looking at resources, looking at the support, looking at funding. What are we doing, especially now in times of this pandemic raging before us, and we are looking at many ways to help our people meet these re-entry, readjustment. Next slide. Okay, what can we do as providers? Then we can come from both clinical view, research view, policy view. So it's always important to have best practices in place. And these are 3 points that come out from the research done by Stately and Waltman. They indicate that the 3 C's are important to keep in mind: the context, the comfort, and the communication. The context is understanding the story, the background of the individual, knowing where they come from and where their tribe, their geographically where they're located, and what their background entails, and being able to have that comfort, again, sense of belongings, being able to have that welcome back and building it and making that experience that is very positive for them. And then communication is the tools and techniques that you have in place, being able to listen and validate that they are important individuals, that they have a structured setting that is traditional and that is welcoming to them. So these 3 areas are very important to keep in mind. So again, context, comfort, and communication. Next slide. Dr. Bigfoot is a clinical psychologist, a colleague of mine. She recently presented at a conference that we had, and I really liked the theory background that she presented in terms of evidence-based practices and practice-based practices, which is your test of time. When we look at the evidence-based practices, we are looking at models that take into consideration the cognitive behavioral factors, looking at attachment and the humanistic values, developmental areas, the neurobiology, and empowerment. All important areas as we move into more of our counseling background. The multicultural counseling has come a long way. So when you look at these areas of evidence-based practices, there's a lot of research and publications that are being done, and they're being viewed. There's an encouragement to tie in what's on the right side, the practice-based practices, that test of time where many of our villages, our nations, it encompasses that thinking, feeling, and doing. And we become so compartmentalized when we think in this way, but we're able to bring in that relationship and that circle theory where things happen in a cycle within our background here, and that we're all related. We look at all our relations. There's the environment, the land base, that we're from, the animal nature, the birds, all of those are nations. We're all related. We recognize all individuals as well. So there's an honoring system that we have in place, that medicine wheel that looks at the life cycle. It looks at the directions. It looks at the villages and where our people have come from historically. We're looking at past. We're looking at present. We're looking into the future. You've heard the term 7 generations from long ago into looking ahead 7 generations, and beautiful literature written on that from some of our Native American authors. And it's so important to recognize that. And then naming is an area that Dr. Bigfoot talks about within our family structures. We have naming ceremonies. That's so important. And then that part of the test of time is that Earth is round and it's very non-judgmental. So when you look at the two theoretical backgrounds, these are facets that you can see. There are additional areas. These are just some beginning areas that I wanted to help you look at, and then you can, this can stimulate your thinking, and you can start looking at what's around you and what you can include in your ways of practice, your ways of research. So a very important area, theory. Okay, next slide. Once we understand where our people are coming from, we need to help them look at a life management plan when they are finding solutions and identifying overcoming challenges. We need to take a look at what do we have in place for them in the community. And I like SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Association that is from under the government, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They developed the dimensions of wellness, and it looks much like the medicine wheel that many of our tribes use universally, but this is split down into spiritual, emotional, intellectual, physical, environmental, financial, occupational, and social. So it's very inclusive, it's very broad, and it also is a tool that is out there that can be utilized with a lot of education and training behind it. So that's one way to look at a model to help with the re-entry process. Next slide. And then we also have a holistic view of success and persistent factors that was designed by Dr. Secatero, who looked at the well-being of the Native people. And again, he was able to look at each of these areas and look into the cultural, the values, you know, the background of our tribal ways, and develop this holistic view, much like the slide before, looking at the holistic way of well-being. This one includes the spiritual, the cultural, the professional well-being, the social, the mental, emotional, physical, and environmental. So a little bit of a shift in ways from the previous slide to include the environmental well-being and the professional well-being. So again, looking at success, what are those areas you want to consider and make part of your approach to looking at and finding solutions as you help with the re-entry process of our people. Next slide. Okay, there's another well-utilized approach that comes from the Native Wellness Institute and the gathering of Native Americans. And this is a 4-level of human growth and responsibility, taking into account the life stages, the infancy, child, adolescents, adults, and elders, and then grouping them under levels that have been that they refer to and have the titles of belonging, mastery, interdependence, and generosity. The Native Wellness Institute really promotes healing of the body, mind, heart, and spirit. And they indicate that each of these areas, they they've utilized the 4 directions such that belonging would be representative in the east. In the eastern direction, and then mastery, the south, interdependence to the east, the west, and generosity to the north. So using these learnings and keeping it in our heart, mind, and body, and being able to embrace the cultural ways, the language, and the tradition has been a real strong point in the healing process. And during the pandemic, the group here, the Native Wellness Institute, many of you are probably familiar with this institute. They were able to have a power hour every day. I believe it's still ongoing, but they were sending out encouragement and honoring and success and just a variety of different ways that we can take care of ourselves, really implement that well-being and that self-care. So looking at these mods, this is the third one I'm showing you. Again, think about it in a way, how do you utilize this to help with the reentry process? There's 3 models here that can be utilized in a way that best fits the population or the community that you're working within. Okay, next slide. And this is also from the Native Wellness Institute. They were able to break down the values and bring in the warrior spirit, the traditional values of wellness, looking at bravery, generosity, peacemaking, wisdom, humility, spirituality, and family are all important values in our self-care and being well. And then the warrior spirit, we've been on a long road with our people that have come across many wars and conflicts and many challenges, but that warrior spirit is ongoing, it's thriving, there's resiliency, and there's an ongoing optimism. So the Native Wellness Institute, I love how they bring it together as a positive product, as the warrior spirit being positive, productive, and proactive, incorporating strengths and beliefs and developing strategies that work for oneself as well as for community. And it's a good medicine that embraces ancestral teachings. And this is really a spirit of looking at how we can best move forward. And we can take these same values and look at the pandemic crisis that we're all in and moving ahead. And because we're resilient, we are surviving, we are living, we are looking ahead, and we are able to look at these difficulties in a way that we find solutions and we progress. So I really believe this is the warrior spirit, the spirit of our people and how they moved onwards. So taking those values and sharing it with our people that are coming again from the jails, the prison system, and having the re-entry approach, being able to incorporate some of these. And if you go on site with the Native Wellness Institute, they do have a lot of handouts that you can use in small groups or in settings that can help you work with the population, the people that you work with. Okay, next slide. Regarding traditional healing, this is really an incorporation of some of the resiliency factors that I have mentioned before. Being able to provide a community and knowing that we do have elders, we have spiritual practitioners and advisors, and the kind of evidence-based ceremonies, they are moving ahead in a lot of these areas. I know in psychology, we do have evidence-based practices to where we're integrating a lot of our evidence-based practices, as mentioned here, into how we can demonstrate to our community that these are effective approaches. These are ways that work, and they build resiliency. They build an attitude of the motivation that is ongoing. So we have the sweat lodge, we have naming ceremonies, we have drumming and dancing and singing and artwork, all part of our tradition that really extends on into healing. Is so important to be able to incorporate these, because like I mentioned, 7 generations ago, we were doing these healing ways. Now, today, we are practicing many of these ways, and there's some research literature that comes out from different institutes around the country, and they are putting best practices back into our communities in looking at hope for Indigenous people, and looking at the traumatic ways that that can be met with by using like the drumming or the pipe ceremonies. And I've seen literature through the Journal of Indigenous Research, which is returning our Native people to ways that they had. So they have written in research about hope, and they've called it like the sweetgrass method, or practices in looking at some of the ways within the community, like looking back at the structure of the canoe, looking at the ways of hunting, looking at the puberty ceremonies. So all of those are healing, and their strengths and strategies that can be incorporated. And I know within the university that I work at the University of Arizona, we do have community action committees, we have student committees, and we're able to talk about a lot of these healing methods as a way to keep ourselves strong and promoting that wellness within our setting. Okay, next slide. The Indigenous practices, again, Dr. Bigfoot was able to share these, indicating that our practices are very valuable. They're meaningful. Our society, clans, and bands. I introduced myself with my clan, and that in itself, I have many relatives. I have my connections. To some of you that are listening out there, you're probably one of my clan members. So those practices are so important. It establishes that relationship, that extended family. Then it's also part of vision seeking. And then some of the other practices that Dr. Bigfoot talks about is humor, teasing, the talking circle, listening, watching, and doing, and history, historical rides and walks. These can be incorporated into your strategies, your home care models, or your wellness models. Smudging, meditation, storytelling, honoring, gifting, very important part. I know I grew up with families that came together and honored each other with gifts. They had giveaways, they had morning sunrise songs, to where there was a lot of singing, a lot of humor and teasing. And these are practices that can be incorporated into expanding your role as a service provider or a policymaker. How do you include this? There's a lot of diverse ways, but it can be included within the work that is being done with our people, because the interventions are rooted in our tradition, and they're used to help prevent a lot of our mental health issues, physical issues. It can be prevention, but it can also be methods that can be combined with the evidence-based practices that come from the Western tradition. So I think today we need to be very cognizant of knowing the Western model in with the traditional practices. So it's always important to look at your data and look at your your practices and make sure that you are working within the ethical means, within best practice means. Okay, next slide. So when we look at our Indigenous knowledge, we have a very broad focus as Dr. Bigfoot has combined this and has shared it, and I find it very enriching in being able to include this slide within this presentation, looking at the wisdom, reflections, beliefs, the practices, the relational connections we have, the kinships, the awareness, and then looking at the environment. We're observers of stars, plants, animals, the movement around us, the ice, the water, the wind, the earth. These are all knowledge that is very important to our Indigenous Native American people. There are ways, and then understanding who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. And this is very important in my work with individuals with whether it's on campus or back on the reservation. I'm able to remind and reflect and give these kind of messages to the individuals with whom I work. They find it very, very, it helps ground them. Okay, right now I'm working with students on the university. Because of the pandemic, we have virtual settings that we'll be turning to. However, we do have connections to the land here where the university is built. So that is, we honor the Thana-Autham and Paskoyaki people here because this is their ancestral lands. So sharing that and having that available for our incoming freshmen is very important. And then having them observe, you know, this is a different setting. It's very desert life. And many of our students are from different areas of the nation, and they come here. We have over 70 tribes represented here. So this Indigenous knowledge is very helpful. So when we have our people that are coming from coming back as re-entry individuals into our community, it's important to ground them, get them thinking back into this way of knowledge, and it really helps recognize who they are, and they know this. And then some of them will be very oriented, very insightful of this when they come back, because a lot of our jails, our prison systems, our where the shelters are, some of the places have included this knowledge. So some of our people are coming back with this knowledge. So again, beware, know who you're working with. Next slide. When this is an example of what I just mentioned, that there are programs out there that utilize approaches that combine Western and Indigenous methods. And with the white bison, they are an incorporated group, and they are in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and they do have this Native specific reentry program. It's a nonprofit organization. It's multifaceted and traditional. They have what they call a Warrior Down program. It's a relapse prevention and recovery program for Native Americans, and they've developed a lot of resources. They have a supportive team. There's a team which is your trained peers, and then other professionals as well. And they have 12 programs in 5 states. They have the medicine wheel approach. There's 12 steps for men and women, and they have fathers and mothers of tradition. So all part of their reentry program, and they have they are able to have this program that that is right within in line with what the presentation is about today. So if you get a chance, look at their website, look at their training materials. I was able to write this all down in the resource list. There's a 3-part series that is just a lot of information contained in there. So so please make use of the resource. It's really informational. Okay, next slide. We are looking at just additional ways of healing. We talked about the healing power of culture and heritage, and we can look at additional resources that come from many different sections of our professional community. There's a lot of research about exercise, walking, running, and yoga, and so that physical movement is very important. There's a change in chemistry when you get up and you move. I know I've been doing a lot of running, and it's really helped with my own endurance, my own stamina as I face the challenges of the pandemic, and then also working within my professional community. So exercise is really important. Looking at journaling, writing down information, and meditation, massage, lots of good areas to look at. And some of our treatment programs have incorporated these strategies into their healing environment. And I've looked at a few traditional treatment programs that are nearby within the neighboring tribes here, and they have done a lot. They've taken meditation and included the tribal language, the narratives within the meditation, and then they've added like herbs along with the massage, and then laughter. They have like stand-up comedians that we have in our community, and they're Native American. So there's a lot of really good coping skills out there. Arts and crafts. I noticed there was a lot of our powwows and our art shows are held back because of the pandemic. But again, these arts and crafts are very important in just mindfulness, just keeping present, keeping focus, and looking toward wellness. We have an abundance of animal-assisted and equine therapies that are coming out, the utilization of horses in the healing process, utilization of like small animals, your dogs, your cats. And we have, I personally dealt with students that really enjoyed this process, you know, the assisted therapy of animals, and then nature therapy, the hikes, the being out in nature, maybe taking a drive. Dr. Bigfoot mentioned drives on the reservation, or taking nature walks. Those are all important. It can be during daylight, it can be at nighttime. There's groups in my community that go out and view the stars, or either look at the bird life. And that's all therapy. Okay, psychoeducation. I love reading. I love research. It's always informational. And it's also knowledge building. And again, there's so many Native American authors out there that have written books on Indigenous healing psychology, Indigenous education within communities, and the list just goes on. So psychoeducation is very important. We have a lot of our Native students that are working on master's theses and dissertations, and they are looking at publishing some of their work, or even writing a book. So it's we're in a time period where there's a lot of the journaling, the writing that is coming forefront, the way I see it. And it's so, I just applaud it. I'm really honored to have this included as part of the coping skills. And again, I work in the higher education setting, and I work with Native American faculty and students who are just really putting out work that is essential and that is a guide for many of our communities. The last, the breathtaking, the breathing techniques works anytime, anywhere. When we're overwhelmed, when we're feeling a need, that taking a breath is what my people call the breathing, the breath, to share a breath, to have that breathing principle. We're usually told that. So it's very, very important to be keyed into, the breathing technique. There's a holiness around it. There's a therapy around it. There's healing around it. And it's also incorporated into meditation, massage, exercise, all the areas that I mentioned before on the slide that it's all inclusive of. So I just wanted to make a note of that here. Okay, next slide. I have the last slide here looking at the attributes is walking in beauty. And I think this really is inclusive of all the dimensions that I have gone over during the first part of this presentation, and being able to walk in beauty. That's you move forward, you progress, you do things the best way you can with hope, with optimism, with joy, with beauty all around. So the attributes that we're striving for to help our people: determination, commitment, hard work. Tenacity is hard work. Success comes from hard work. And then acceptance. A lot of times we look at our past, our present, our future. Where do we need to accept things? How do we take care of ourselves? And then audacious. Being an audacious worker, that hard worker, that boldness that comes out. These are all attributes that I believe we need to think about and incorporate into our work as care providers, as policymakers, as clients, as people that are coming from the environments that are from the prison, from the jails, from the sheltered settings, from the rehabilitation centers. Okay, so we need to take a really positive, hopeful approach, looking at positive ways. Walking in beauty just really comes across for me, because my grandmother, my grandfather, the leaders in my community always talked about walking in beauty, and they led by example. They forgave, they showed their strength, they showed their steadfastness, their resiliency, their leadership, and they power up when things get tough, when things get challenging. I've seen my grandmother, my grandfather, even in their elder years, they were able to put their shoulder to the wheel and say, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to move forward with this. These are attributes of walking in beauty. And I really feel this is a resiliency. It's a way for our self-identity, our self-respect, that self-care, and how we protect ourselves. And these we can utilize in our treatment approaches, in our intervention approaches. And then also prevention. If we can incorporate these attributes into prevention programs, we can serve the life cycle, our young, our adolescents, our adults, our elderly. So it's very comprehensive, it's very broad, but I love to include ways that can best help my people. So I thought I would share the slide in this fashion. Next slide. So just real quick on closing remarks, and then we can open up for questions. Just that our tribes, we have many tribes across the nation. There's over 500, and we have unique experience. And then with our re-entry participants, our people from the institutions, the jails, the prison, the rehab programs. They have criminal histories that vary. There's the stress from incarceration, stress of reintegration, two really double-sided. You know, there's stress when you're there, stress when you're coming out. There's stress in transition, and there's moving onward can be stressful too. So we need to look at each of our clients, our patients, case by case, focus on each participant, work with the existing programs, okay, your support, your resources in your community, within your tribes. And communication is so important. I can't stress that enough. A lot of times, we just a simple, you know, random acts of kindness, saying thank you, you know, I got your email, thank you, you know, for the referral. That kind of communication is a real mark from our tribal traditions. I know I grew up with tribal elders, tribal community, where there was communication. We didn't have phones or texts when I was a child. And my grandfather would take a message and drive from house to house, or he used to saddle up and go by horseback, house to house. So communication is important. Sometimes we don't know what the other is doing when we have our offices side by side, or now that we have Zoom and virtual meetings, sometimes we're not in communication, and then we don't know what we're doing. So let's keep the circle open and revolving, and helping our people. And wellness plan is very important. It's a healing plan. That's how we see progress. So I'll end on that note, and I think I have a last slide here. Okay, may you all walk in beauty. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts, and we'll open up for questions. And just the slide is just some of our healing nature from our baskets from the Navajo Nation. The center basket is from the Thana Autham Nation, and then we have the smudging, the eagle feather, the arrowhead, and then we have the drum, flute, and the drum and the flute there. Okay, I'm open for questions.
All right, Dr. Aviso, let's see if we'll give him a second here to ask us any questions. Hey, and I see you raised your hand. If you guys want to type your question into the questions pane there on the side, that'd be great. Yep, Pam, you have a question. You can type it to me, and I'll ask Dr. Aviso. Yeah, guys, if you see on the GoToWebinar panel there, if you want to ask a question, you can click the questions pane. And okay. Hey, okay, Dr. Aviso, we got a few coming in. Do you have presentations for reentry programs?
Do I have a presentation for your reentry programs?
Yeah, that's all it says.
This would be an example of a reentry program, but more at the individual, more at the client level. I can do those, but you will have to talk with me personally, so I know your community, your people, and how you want to do this.
When you talk about welcome home protocols, what does that look like?
Welcome home, when we have that within our community that I work within, it's having a gathering, like a small gathering within a building, and then just eating together and introducing one another to where we're making those reconnections between the service providers and the clients or the families, and then being able to share a meal and coming together. that's one of our welcoming. And then within our rehab programs that I've participated in, we're able to do the same, maybe sharing a song, you know, thinking about tradition. How do we welcome in our tradition? We usually acknowledge by clans, our clan structure, our family structure, and share that, and then be able to share a meal. Sharing a meal is also ceremonial. I know we do a lot of ceremonies to where either we start with eating together or we end together, and having that blessing at the beginning and at the end, and very acknowledging, because we're talking about, we're land-based, right? So we're very inclusive of our environment, and we honor and respect each other. So that would be my example of what a welcome is and what I've seen and been a part of. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, I have another question here. You might not know this, but we can shoot him, maybe direct him to the references section. But do you happen to know the title of Dr. Secatiro's Holistic View paper?
He writes, his article appears, that what I have on the resource list is Beyond the Asterisk, Understanding Native Students in Higher Education. But he has some, if you go into Scholar Google research, you can find additional research that he has published. And he talks about a lot of the wellness philosophy, the well-being philosophy that I shared. But I do have his book that I've cited through the references and resources.
Okay. Someone asked what college you're located at. I believe that's the University of Arizona, correct, Dr. Aviso?
Right. I'm at the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona.
Okay. I think I have a few more questions here, and then we'll start wrapping up. Do you have some ideas for assessment tools for Native American communities? And do you have to pay for them or be licensed to use?
I know the resource out of Denver, Colorado, the Native American, it's American Indian Alaska Native Mental Health Research. They've done some research on tools that have to do with both wellness and then also mental health disparities. So it's that I can't name all of them off. It's just such a broad list right now, but they have some tools there. And what can be utilized also is on the American Psychological Association website. They do have a few articles in there written by Native Americans, and then also the National Association of School Psychologists. If you Google in there on Native American, assessing Native American, you can look at the tools that they would recommend regarding the school population students. So those are the two sources that I utilize and I'm aware of. But specifically, I know some specific tools, but if you leave your name and number, I can get back to you.
Okay. I've had a few questions about getting a copy of the slides or a recording of the presentation, just so everybody knows. We can ask Dr. V about the slides, but this webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to find it on our APPA Tribal Resource website. Give me a few days to get it uploaded and a link created and all that stuff. So hopefully by early next week, you guys will be able to access the recording. And on the last slide, I think we have the URL for the website. In a few minutes, I'll let Pam show you guys that slide. I've had that question come in a few times, just so everybody knows. Now, this is a really good question before we start to close out, so I want to have you address it, Dr. Aviso. But do you have any advice for Native freshman college students interested in getting involved in this field?
Yes, we have Society of Indian Psychologists. Find it on the website, University of Utah. We have the organization there. We have the Society of Indian Psychologists. We have a mentoring program, and we do a lot of work with students that want to get into any area psychology, educational psychology, clinical psychology, school psychology, rehabilitation psychology. There's a variety of areas, but we have a mentoring program. If you're a freshman, connect with us. We will be happy to start a process, and we do have, our mentoring is virtual, and we have it all. We start in the fall time. We have an application process, and once you signed up with us, and then we meet with you throughout the fall semester and spring semester. Yes, there is, that's the best source that I know of right offhand, but I know there's other sources coming out of other universities like UND, University of North Dakota, and then I think it's Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma. They have a program too, but there's programs out there, yes, but you can start with us. This, again, Society of Indian Psychologists at the university. Look at the website. Thank you for that question. It's a very needed area.
Yeah, I didn't want that question to go unanswered, so I thought it was an excellent question. We've had several people message in and just say thank you, Dr. Aviso, and it was a great presentation. And I just wanted to express that. We've had several people say that, so I wanted to relay the message. And we're coming up on our time here, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to hand it over to Pam real quick to talk about these last two slides, and we'll close out.
All right, thank you, Travis. As he said, my name is Pam Brooks. I'm from APPA, the developmental coordinator there. Dr. Arviso, again, thank you so much for your presentation, for sharing your time, your traditions, your culture, your expertise with us. Even though you addressed this in terms of reentry, I think we could all benefit from embracing those cultural practices of community and family and coming together. So again, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Thank you to all of you who attended today's presentation. We know some of you are probably members of APPA, and we certainly appreciate your support of that. But for those of you who are not members, we want to just say we have the opportunity for you to join. We would love for you to come be a part of APPA. Really, this is a great time in our life right now. There's so much going on within the reform of criminal justice throughout the entire spectrum. And so it's just a really good time to become engaged and to learn more about our world and our cultures. So again, we encourage you to check out our website, appa-net.org, to learn more about APPA and to join. Next slide, please, Travis.
Thank you so much.
And also, we want to just bring your attention to the Tribal Community Corrections Support Center. This is also a great resource for helping tribal communities who want to improve community supervision practices. There's a lot of great information, a lot of great ways to connect with other people who are working in the field. And Nan Benali of APPA is connected to this, and she can also, if you contact Nan, she will be able to help give you some additional assistance and to direct you to some other resources. So again, that's something that you need to check out. You can get to that through APPA's website as well, or you can go to appa-net.org/TCCSC/, and that'll take you directly there to that site. And again, I just want to thank everybody involved today. Dr. Arviso, again, thank you so much for a great presentation. Thank you to everyone who attended. And on behalf of APPA and all my colleagues there, again, thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Travis?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Yeah, I just want to close with a poem written by Nia Francisco. It's called Blue Horses for Navajo Women. Can I do that? Sure. Okay, this is the title of the poem is Away, which means baby. Okay, Away nishna shamado shija bejebi honishto do shayone at era. A baby I am, my mother and my father in their heart. I am existing. It is that. No, they do not forget me not. With that, blessings, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone.